Hi, everyone. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to your first lesson of your ECD training at EDU-BUILD Institute online. For those of you who are returning students, welcome back from your break. Today we are covering Unit Standard 244485, which can be found on page 425 of your learner guide. How this usually works is I try to give a very comprehensive verbal explanation of your work. What I have done with these slides, however, is I have given a comprehensive written summary. I will thus be doing the voiceover for these summaries. The way I have written them is in such a way that I would explain it verbally. Therefore, those who prefer to read can read without the voiceovers. Those who might have issues listening to the voiceovers can read it and still receive sufficient information. And those who prefer to listen, or those who are not English first language speakers, can rather listen to the voiceover and have a comprehensive understanding of the content. So let us have a look at design activities to support the development of babies, toddlers, and young children. When designing activities to support the development of babies and toddlers, one needs to bear in mind the importance of individualism. Each child is different and requires a different approach. Facilitators and teachers need to be aware of the biological, that is what we are made up of inherently, our DNA, and the cognitive, which is our way of thinking, and environmental, what is our external forces, determinants of a child, whether the child comes from a biological background where there might be a biological barricade or handicap passed down, whether it's cognitive, where a child isn't performing on the same cognitive level as another child, or environmental factors, perhaps the child is in an abusive household. All of this needs to be taken into account. Note, creativity goes a long way in the classroom when dealing with all these individuals. While bearing individualism in mind, it is also imperative that the facilitator or teacher keeps organization skills at bay. It is no use focusing on each child's strengths and weaknesses while forgetting to move through the curriculum punctually and effectively. So, we also need to keep in mind as facilitators that there is a schedule to follow. Now, different schools also offer different levels of leniency and levels of difficulty, whether your child is in a special needs school, is homeschooled, or is in the mainstream. The mainstream does move at a lot faster pace. However, the teacher is still able to pull the child aside in the middle of the or at the end of the day to suggest means of moving forward. Lesson planning also requires understanding of your curriculum content, the resources required to complete the content, and the additional time and effort required to cover content with the learners. You then have activities to complete. So your first activity is on page 429. Complete part 1 and part 2 of the activities on pages 429 and 430. Online learners are then required to take a video of their lesson presentation and email it, or to submit it on your classroom. The link below contains a helpful and thorough example of how to do a lesson plan. We also have videos attached on our YouTube page of how to do a lesson plan. Now, let us look at child developmental milestones. Milestones indicate a stage transition moving from one stage to the next. Some milestones are more variable than others, which means some might have different changes than others. They happen at a different pace, for example. For example, receptive speech indicators do not show how much variation Among children with normal hearing, but expressive speech milestones can be quite variable. So let us look at aspects of child development. Physical growth, for example. Physical growth in stature and weight occurs over the 15 to 20 years following birth, as the individual changes from the average weight of 3.5 kilograms and length of 50 centimeters at full term birth to full adult size. Then the speed and pattern of development. Birth weight is doubled in the first 4 months, tripled by age 12 months, but not quadrupled until 24 months. Growth then proceeds at a slow rate until shortly before puberty, between 9 and 15 years of age. When a period of rapid growth occurs, growth is not uniform in rate and timing across all body parts, which means if it's not uniform, it's not the same, it doesn't go at the same rate. Mechanisms of developmental change. Genetic factors play a determining role in growth rate. Genetic factors, remember we spoke about the biological factors earlier, can produce the maximum growth only if the environmental factors are adequate. And the hindrance to growth rate are poor nutrition, and these are our environmental factors: poor nutrition, frequent injury and disease, also not having enough access to healthcare, for example. But we also look at population differences. There are few population differences in growth rates or patterns, except that poor environmental conditions may delay puberty and the associated growth spurt. The markedly different age at puberty of boys and girls mean that boys and girls of age 11 or 12 are at very different points in maturation and may reverse the usual sexual differences in physical size. And so, as we know, boys and girls grow and develop differently. Girls usually mature faster than boys, and boys have different biological factors and indicators, and so there are differences in the two and how they grow and when they grow, and this we know. So our individual differences also include or are determined by factors such as genetics, environmental differences, and individual differences in reproductive maturation. Now, when we look at motor development, this is our movement, motors. A motor makes a car move. So, our motor development, speed and pattern of development. Types of movement develop in stage like sequences. For example, locomotion at 6 to 8 months involves creeping on all fours and then proceeds to pulling to stand and then cruising while holding onto one object, walking while holding an adult's hand, and finally walking independently. Then a child learning to walk, the mechanism of motor development. What is involved in the development of motor development? Genetic components. So that is what mom and dad have passed down to you. Nutrition, what you eat, and exercise, opportunities to carry out movement. Does the child have space to move, to climb, to jump? And that will obviously assist in facilitation of growth and development. And then practice and learning, which links into those opportunities. Individual differences. Normal individual differences in motor ability are common and depend in part on the child's weight and build. However, after the infant period, normal individual differences are strongly affected by opportunities to practice, observe, and be instructed on specific movements. For example, going to a dance school. You might be a natural dancer, but the dance school allows you the opportunity to practice, to watch a teacher, to be instructed, to show how you are supposed to participate in certain movements. Atypical, which means it's against the typical, when the letter A or anti. or however, and those prefixes mean against, opposite of. So atypical motor development may be an indication of developmental delays or problems such as autism or cerebral palsy. Population differences. Ethnic differences in reflex movements of newborn infants have been reported. Cultural differences may encourage learning of motor skills like using the left hand only for sanitary purposes and the right hand for all other uses. We then have cognitive or intellectual development, and that is speed and pattern of this development. It has been suggested by theorists such as Piaget. And for those who did first semester this year, at this point you should know a lot about Piaget. And for those who are only starting with us now, you are going to learn a lot about Piaget. So, theorists such as Piaget suggest that cognitive development proceeds in a stage like fashion, with qualitative as well as quantitative differences between one age period and others. So, what are Piaget's theories? Please go ahead and see a summary below. As I said, for those who have been with us, go back to what we have learned about Piaget in our lessons, and for those who are still new to us, you'll be learning so much more in the future. Now, the mechanism of cognitive development. Cognitive development has genetic and other biological mechanisms, as as is seen in the many genetic causes of mental retardation. What does cognitive mean? According to Merriam-Webster.com, it is relating to or being or involving conscious intellectual activity. Individual differences. Individual children achieve different cognitive abilities. Schooling systems are based on the assumption that cognitive differences are not large between learners of the same age. Hence we group children of the same age starting at a particular grade. You are 5 turning 6 in grade naught, 6 turning 7 in grade 1. So we base that on the assumption that according to your age group, you should have reached certain cognitive milestones. Atypical delays in cognition may be cause for concern and may appear for an array of reasons such as cultural or environmental factors, genetic factors, or severe injury. Population differences when we are looking at cognitive abilities. There are few population differences in cognitive development. Boys and girls show some differences in their skills and preferences, but there is a great deal of overlap between the groups. Differences in cognitive achievement of different ethnic groups appear to result from cultural or other environmental factors, not so much genetic factors. So it could be cultural, what you are taught, what you see around you, your environmental factors, what you have been exposed to in a particular culture. Remember, people of the same culture tend to group together. Therefore, that group of people are likely to experience the same environmental factors. It is not that it is genetic. Now, bear in mind, different population groups are also exposed to different kinds of resources. Population groups of different economic standing do not always have equal opportunities. Learners in rural areas also tend to have less access to resources and advanced infrastructural facilities, such as population groups in high income brackets. That is all for today, for this session. As a matter of fact, more is to come today. If you have any questions or queries, please feel free to contact us. Please do have a look at your activity list and begin on your activities. Please submit everything via your classroom. If you have severe difficulty doing so, you may email it through to us.